I started flying airplanes about 1970. I was working at the time, and one of my workmates was taking airplane flying lessons, and he asked me one day, he says, "Hey, how about come sit in the back seat? I think you're going to like this." So I had never been in a small plane before. So what I did was I sat in the back seat, and it was love at first flight. I was a hook, line, and sinker into aviation. That afternoon, I scheduled and took my first flight lesson, and it took me about 9 months of flight lessons every weekend and a couple of times during the week to get my private pilot certificate. Yeah, after I got my private pilot certificate, I was renting airplanes. At the time, I lived in New Jersey, and pretty much everybody does the same thing. We called it the $150 hamburger. Every Saturday, you had to think of some place to go, and of course, you would fly, and you would get a hamburger and French fries, and then fly home again. Just any excuse to fly. So I was flying all over the New Jersey, New York, Connecticut area, and at the end of the year, I added up all my rental receipts, and I said, wow, this is crazy. I should buy an airplane. And of course, all my friends agreed. And so I bought an airplane. I bought a Piper Cherokee 140, little four-place, 150 horsepower airplane that was inexpensive to operate, burned about 8 gallons an hour. It was inexpensive to maintain, and I owned that plane for years. Fixed-wing aircraft, you're basically a solo artist. You can go out, fly airplanes, and just be by yourself. The flight planning and using our aircraft and our aviation system here in the United States is paramount in airplanes. With balloons, ballooning is a family sport, or it's a team sport if you have other friends helping you out. No one can fly a balloon alone. With my balloons, I typically like to have 5 or 6 crew people helping me out because there's a lot of things to do. You have a fan, you have a lot of weight to carry around, where with airplanes, basically you're carrying a chart and a compass with you. In the early 80s, I took my first balloon flight, and that also was love at first flight. Sold the airplane and bought a balloon, and then since then has been mostly ballooning. I still fly fixed wing occasionally, but the balloons then, my primary love. Over the years I've owned dozens of balloons, and ballooning has been a great family activity. It keeps the kids, basically you know where the kids are, what they're doing, who they're with. They are your crew, and with the family, traveled all over the United States with the ballooning, and also with the commercial aspect of ballooning. I flew corporate contracts with Tony the Tiger, the Horde Festival, and a number of others, and they took me all over the United States. But that eventually branched out when I started flying special shapes, and I've flown in Sweden and in England and France, and most recently went to China for a month. Since I started ballooning, going to festivals have been one of my favorite things to do. By going to festivals, first starting in New Jersey and doing the local ones in New Jersey, I basically branched out and started doing between 20 and 25 festivals a year, primarily in the warmer months, the spring, summer, and fall festivals. Many are large ones. New Jersey Festival of Ballooning is the second largest one in the country, held in July outside the New York area, but the big one, the granddaddy of all of them, is the Albuquerque Festival. Albuquerque Festival is always held the first full weekend to the second weekend in October of every year. And it brings balloons from 50 different countries, many from the United States. I've flown there where there has been 1,000 balloons in the air at one given time. And it is the best one in terms of organization, in terms of media coverage, in terms of flying area. The Albuquerque and this desert southwest of the United States is a terrific area to fly in. It's wide open, it's scenic, and there's lots of places to land, and the people love balloons out there. The Hudson Hot Air Affair is my first winter festival. Back where I'm coming from in New Jersey, we typically would fly down into the 20-degree range or so. This morning I got here, it was about 15 below zero, and it's the coldest I've ever been here. And it was a shame we didn't fly, but the way these festivals work is we have a balloon meister who is in charge of looking at the weather, looking at the flying area, making a calculation as to where we would go should we fly. And this morning, with the winds that we had, and especially with the extreme cold, the decision was made to not fly. And we'll always make those decisions for safety. So we're real confident that we'll fly this afternoon. We have to be eternal optimists in this sport. Well, there's a lot of things that you have to consider flying in the colder weather. In the summertime, the temperature is typically 70 to 100 degrees. You don't worry about things like your crew and frostbite, the vehicle having enough safety things in the vehicle, snow tires, tow chains, things like that. As far as the aviation side of it goes, big difference. In the summertime, the pressure of the propane at 90 degrees will be approximately 130 pounds. Our burners need a minimum of 85 pounds to operate properly. And this morning, with about minus 15 degrees, if you didn't take any safety work for the propane, you would basically have 20 or 30 pounds of propane pressure, which wouldn't be safe. So the special things that we do, I have my tanks, and most of the fellas here have their tanks wrapped with heat tapes. Air America was born for my desire and my family's desire to continue and to expand into the area of commercial ballooning. When people get a private pilot certificate, that allows the pilot to basically fly their friends and neighbors, and you cannot exchange money. He can't do it commercially. So once the commercial pilot certificate came, Air America was born almost immediately because I wanted to fly rides. And so we started a website, listed ourselves in the yellow pages, and in the New York metro area, within 25 miles, there was 11 million people. And it was amazing how many people want to fly in balloons in the New York area. So I was flying rides every weekend that I wasn't at a festival. Well, the balloon I brought this year is a little yellow fish called Gus T. Guppy. The T stands for the. So Gus the Guppy, little special shaped balloon. It's easy to fly. It will fly pilot plus one, and he's basically a whimsical yellow guppy that basically the kids love it, the organizers love it, I love it because he's easy to fly, and we've taken Gus now all over the United States, all over Canada, and as I said before, we've been in many of the European countries, and we spent a month in China with him. And that was a very interesting experience going to China because there is no sport balloon business at this point. So they're seeing things like that for the very first time, and they were very excited with it. All of the European countries to fly in are pretty easy because they all model their aviation rules after the United States and the FAA. China is completely different though, because in China there is no sport aviation at all. And there's very little business aviation at all. That's a growing market that over the last 2 years has taken off tremendously. So when we came in, it was an interesting process to find the right government officials to speak to and to convince them that we knew what we were doing, and to allow 15 American balloon teams to come in and fly American aircraft in their country, and they really didn't know what to do with us. And so eventually they just shook their head and said, you guys are crazy, go do what you want. And so we did exactly that. We flew for 2 weeks every day up in the Guiyang area, which is northwest of Beijing, about 800 miles, right on the border between inner and outer Mongolia. It's very much like our desert southwest, and it's their coal mining area, therefore it's their steel production area. And because there's not much up there, it's a big military area. So as we went out and we would fly every day, they would put government officials in our balloons to make sure that we didn't venture over any of their military sites and took pictures. But it was a very interesting experience for those 2 weeks that we flew, and then we had an extra 2 weeks of sightseeing going through the country, both out in the country and in Beijing. And that was an amazing experience too.